Vince Cable, a Member of Parliament for 20 years, leader of the Liberal Democrats between 2017 and 2019. You stood down at that last general election, all the good people did. Do you miss anything about being in Parliament?
No, not really. I think my starting point was I wasn't quite 80, so I felt I was young enough to start a new career, which is what I've been doing, writing books. I'm involved in business, promoting hydrogen infrastructure. And they've given me a professorship at the London School of Economics. So I've got a very full portfolio existence. And if I'd stayed behind in Parliament, it would have been in a rather sad environment. My party hadn't done very well. There was all the disruption around COVID. So I'm glad to be out of it, doing something totally different. I deliver my leaflets for the local party, so I keep that up. But nothing active and serious. Yeah.
You recently revealed, Vince, that when you were leader of the Liberal Democrats, you had a stroke. Why didn't you say anything at the time?
Well, it wasn't a big stroke, right? What they call mini strokes, but it does have the effect of affecting your speech, your memory, and your effectiveness. I suppose in practical terms, I didn't know how serious it was or how long it was going to last, but I think my instincts was to sort of cover this up, because my late wife died of cancer, which of course is a totally different order of magnitude of seriousness, but she always took the view that she didn't want people to know about it because they then treat you as a goner. They're very nice, but they treat you as a has-been. And I think once I had this instinct that told me that once politicians talk about their own illnesses, people write them off. Clearly that was a mistake. You saw what happened in the midterm election in America. That guy Fetterman won a very crucial state despite having a mini stroke in the middle of it, and he flourished on the back of it. So I think I made a mistake, but that was what I did it.
Do you think politics, there's something or anything about politics that is particularly unforgiving?
Yeah, it's quite brutal, and as you'll know, you've been there. It's a bit like being out on the African savannah. Once an animal is wounded, the predators go for you. And so it's that kind of tough, dog-eat-dog environment that you have to adapt to. There's no point complaining about it because, that's the world you're going into. But it is a different environment from everyday life.
And you were a Secretary of State under that coalition government between David Cameron and Nick Clegg, talking about dog eat dog. Who was the toughest Tory to work with?
Well, some of them were difficult. Some of them actually, I wouldn't say they were friends exactly, but I got on very well with, David Willits, who was my Deputy Universities Minister, great guy, and we worked very well together. I managed to get on well with Osborne. It was actually in private rather more companionable than he is in public. I think of all the Tories, the most sort of aggressive in a way was Pickles, but I never quite got to the bottom of what the problem was. Michael Gove has matured, I think, become quite an interesting politician, more open-minded. But at the time was a real clever dick. I always felt he had to score the last point in any conversation and always had to try and get his way. They varied, but you learnt to... The attitude I had to the Tories I worked with, particularly those in my department, was... leave your weapons at the door because we've got a job to do. And by and large, they respected that.
I'm fascinated by if there's any examples about Michael Gove being a clever dick.
Well, he always had to have the last word in any cabinet discussion. Anyway, he was quite witty with it, but you realise the personality type. Yeah.
With the benefit of hindsight of being part of that coalition government, should the Liberal Democrats ever go into government with the Conservatives again? Can you ever see a scenario where that happens?
Yes, I can't see us going into the coalition with the Conservatives for the foreseeable future, actually. It was... I think if I summarise it, I think the coalition was good for the country, but bad for it was devastating for the party. And, we can argue about all kind of mistakes that were made along the way. I think the fundamental problem was that the party was sort of centre-left. Our natural instincts were to work with Labour people, certainly mine. I'm perfectly comfortable working with Gordon Brown if he got back again. But the numbers in the 2010 election made it that was the only way to have a stable government. And we were in the middle of a financial crisis. There was a lot of pressure on us to, get together, form a government, provide stable rule, which is what we did. But it was terrible for the party. We still haven't fully recovered. And it's going to take a lot of rebuilding to do that.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because the party it should be doing much better in the polls. It's a fair distance now since that coalition government. And my instinct is people don't love the Conservatives and they're still not too sure about Keir Starmer's Labour. So it would be ripe for a Lib Dem revival.
Well, it's a bit, a bit of a curate's egg, good and bad. In local government, we've had a big revival. Certainly when I was party leader, we had a massive breakthrough. We've done pretty well ever since. We did well in the European elections. There's this underlying support of 20% or so at that time. But I think there's a difference between the national polls, where we're doing badly, and the kind of local politics, and it relates to the way the first past the post system operates. We tend to concentrate on areas where we're second and can do well, and we tend to neglect the other areas which we can't win, and it's going to resolve itself into a Conservative versus Labour contest. So I think the Lib Dems will make headway. We'll win seats at the next election, 20 possibly, which would be a big recovery, yes, even on the basis of a relatively slow overall rating.
And it may be that the Labour Party may be the biggest party, and they may need Lib Dem support. They may seek Lib Dem support. What should be the price of that support?
Well, I think the premise of the argument is that the Labour Party may not get an overall majority, and I think I would expect that, because the Tories are pretty ruthless. I mean, even if they flounder for the next year or so, the way they conduct elections, as we painfully know in the past, they're sort of utterly ruthless and focused. And, Labour may be overestimating their support at the moment. So we could get into a hung parliament situation. I think the Lib Dem approach would be to be supportive, probably not think about a coalition, but to support a new government constructively. And the price, if you put it like that, will almost certainly be electoral reform, not simply because it's good for us, but because the system is just not working well. We're getting governments that are unrepresentative, in which small parties, not just us, but the Greens, are basically shut out of parliamentary life, which is not good for the country.
Reform on the right?
Reform, yeah, well, why not? No, I mean, Farage should have been in Parliament arguing his case, not sitting outside. No, absolutely, they should be there. So I think that would be the price. I think the Labour Party understand that. They've adopted it as part of their party policy. I think it would be in their manifesto. It wouldn't then need a referendum. And it's a question of how much they prioritise it. We may get a Blair-type landslide, in which case they may take the view, well, we don't need anybody's help, so we'll forget about them. But I think that's, I would say, 1 in 3, 1 in 2 possibility that this could happen.
Okay, so you referred to your new writing career amongst the new things that you are doing now. You wrote a book this year called How to Be a Politician. What, in your view, is the most common mistake that new MPs make?
Well, I think in general politicians suffered from the danger of self-importance. The way I start the book is recognising that not just in Britain, but in very many countries, politicians are the least trusted of all professions for a variety of reasons. The fact that you have to compromise, you're making promises you can't keep, all of those things. So politicians start with a public trust deficit. And I think you have to be listening to the public, not treating yourself as a terribly self-important individual, which I think politicians' instincts often to do. So that would be the first thing. And I think my second is you get a lot of adversity. I mean, it took me 30 years from first standing for Parliament to getting in. You have to be patient, and people just give up at the first hurdle. Never going to get anywhere.
Interesting. Your first wife, Olympia, was diagnosed with breast cancer in 1987. You lost her in 2001. How do you come to terms with watching the love of your life, I guess?
Well, it was a very, loving, supporting relationship, and I was incredibly lucky that I had a lovely woman that I was married to. But and it did mean at the end of her life, I was trying to combine politics, a job, and being a carer, which is not easy. But she supported me through very difficult times. I kept standing for Parliament and failing, but she encouraged me not to give up, even when she was ill. Which was, and I think politicians who have that supportive, loving family background, are so much stronger for it. I mean, I think we don't often get into the role of a partner in a relationship, but it's often more crucial than the superficial impression would give.
Absolutely. You remarry.
Right.
You're married to Rachel now. I noticed that you still have 2 wedding bands.
Yeah,
on your finger.
I do. Well, I'm one of these incredibly lucky people who's been happily married twice. 2 lovely women have sort of crossed my path at the right moment, and it's sort of helped. It's one of the great strengths of life, actually. And it's not just that, but their families have come together. So I've got a very large extended family. Rachel has a significant number of grandchildren. I have 3, and we're not an extended family in the old-fashioned sense, but virtually, sometimes in real time. So it's a great strength and happiness in life. Yeah.
You were in Strictly Come Dancing in the Christmas show. You love ballroom dancing. Is there anything about Strictly Come Dancing we don't know?
Well, I was pushing the boundaries a bit because I was a cabinet minister at the time, so I wasn't quite in the same position as Ed Balls and Anne Widdecombe and people like that. But it was a fantastic experience. I mean, I basically had 6 or 7 lessons beforehand just to prepare the dance. And it was quite a bad time. I mean, the whole lot of really bad things were happening at the coalition at that time. We just had the tuition fee issue, my problems with News International, various things of that kind, and it came as a bit of light relief in the middle of it. But it was actually very intense. I mean, you don't rerun it. It's all live in real time, and I'd completely messed up the dress rehearsal. But fortunately, the final went quite well, and I got a 10 from Len and a 10 from Craig, I think, as well, amazingly. So it turned out well, and people now remember me for that. They have no idea what I did in the coalition government for 5 years, but they do remember that.
Love it.
Thanks.
Love it. Thank you very much, Vince Cable.
Thanks.